AWS CodeWhisperer, GitHub Copilot. As developer, are you still confused between which assistant you should choose? This video is for you. Let me talk to you guys about how CodeWhisperer and Copilot are different and what are some of the features that you can leverage for Copilot and CodeWhisperer. Let us first start with the GitHub Copilot. The GitHub Copilot is a tool that is a collaboration between the OpenAI's GPT model and GitHub. GPT models are someone that is going to generate in real time the predictions, the suggestions for your code. GitHub Copilot provides you features like auto completion of the code, auto suggestions, auto document generation, right? And I'm going to talk about each one of them in depth. Now imagine that you are stuck as a developer in a particular problem. You are not getting the logic straight and there is frustration piling up on you. GitHub Copilot has features like code suggestion. You put a comment, ask the question to Copilot that I am trying to write logic so and so. Please help me generating the code. It will suggest the code and with one click you can accept or reject that code. Imagine you are working on a tight deadline and you feel that if there is a second hand to finish your code, that'd be great help. GitHub Copilot also has feature of code auto completion. Imagine you started typing about a particular library and then the Copilot understands what you want to do based on your variable name and provides you with the suggestion. Again, with one click you can accept or reject this suggestion. Thus all these suggestions are essentially your code generated. You can accept by just scanning through it, and imagine the time that you would have saved would be in minutes. All of these suggestions are powered by one of the great feature of Copilot, which is code generation. It is not only that Copilot supports only Java or Python. There are multiple frameworks that Copilot adheres to and that Copilot can be leveraged for. And last but not the least, where does this intelligence go or where does this intelligence come from? Every piece of code that you accept is learned, trained from the various code bases that GitHub has access to, the public code bases. This is GitHub Copilot. Features like code suggestion, code auto completion, code generation, and framework support, as well as the in-depth intelligence. Now let me talk about the AWS's CodeWhisperer, another smart assistant that can allow you to complete the code, has in-depth knowledge on AWS services, pre-trained on the AWS's code base, right? And is there to help you make your cloud development easier. Like I mentioned, one of the major features that CodeWhisperer comes with is the integration to AWS. As CodeWhisperer is trained on the code base that AWS owns, code base of where the AWS services are written, it is way more advanced than what we can imagine or what we can write. Imagine you are working with a service that you have no idea about, but you are supposed to write a piece of code that can talk to that service. There comes CodeWhisperer, right? Runs a spell like a magic wand and gets your code running. Because CodeWhisperer has this in-depth knowledge of AWS, it can not only write code for you, but it can also suggest changes in your architecture, right? It can optimize the way your applications, your microservices, your services talk internally, and it can suggest performance improvements, right? Like instead of writing an API to connect with S3 to upload a file, maybe use S3's SDK and just upload the file directly from your machine or from your application. CodeWhisperer, because it's a private tool on your AWS console for your AWS account, right? It's also available for individuals, but the next feature that I'm going to talk about is more tuned towards employees who have to adhere to coding standards, have to adhere to security principles while writing the code. CodeWhisperer can actually tell you, can actually expose any security vulnerabilities that you may have in your code. what it takes to do so. Just select a piece of code and ask the CodeWhisperer to figure out if there are any vulnerabilities associated in that code. And CodeWhisperer will take his own in-depth knowledge and will work on your repository to get that security vulnerabilities, if any, shown to you, and will also suggest if and how this can be resolved. In today's era of automation, infrastructure as a code has taken the application deployment to the next level. With AWS CodeWhisperer, you can also generate CloudFormation templates and Terraform templates. It makes an infra engineer life also easier when he or she have to just type, can you please create a block that generates or that runs or that creates an EC2 instance of size t2.micro, and boom, the piece of code is given to you. Excellent assistants, both of them, GitHub's Copilot and AWS's CodeWhisperer. Let me give you some 10-12 comparative analysis points that will allow you to determine which assistant you should choose for your development. Let me just put some 10 points forward to do a comparative analysis between these exceptional code assistants. The first one, what was the thought behind building this assistant? Who are the target audience for this? When GitHub Copilot caters to mass, the public, general availability, AWS CodeWhisperer is good for people who wants to deploy applications on AWS, right? Who wants to tightly work or tightly integrate their applications to AWS ecosystem. Another point to ponder over is that from where this assistant learns. When GitHub Copilot learns from the public repositories available on GitHub, whereas your AWS CodeWhisperer learns from the enhanced, enriched code base of AWS themselves and the individual code repositories that individual users have it on AWS's builder. Another point that you should keep in mind is security, right? Today's world of attacks, you need to know that who can provide you with the best security suggestions. GitHub Copilot has limited security availability, having said that, limited but essential, whereas on AWS CodeWhisperer side, you have inbuilt security scans that at runtime suggest security vulnerabilities and on demand also can produce security reports. Another one, if you are an infra engineer, this is something that that becomes the primary focus. Who can help me write infrastructure as a code script? GitHub Copilot does help, but in this particular point, AWS's CodeWhisperer takes the race forward. If you are an infra engineer, this point becomes your primary focus, the infrastructure as a code, where GitHub Copilot does help, but AWS CodeWhisperer wins the race. What are some of the limitations, right? Somewhere I feel that GitHub Copilot lacks the understanding of context, whereas on CodeWhisperer it is highly tuned towards AWS services, right? So it's you as an individual, you need to decide which route to take. If you are building an application for AWS that is going to be deployed on AWS, in my view, opt for CodeWhisperer. If you are deploying an application that is a very Azure centric application, in my view, Copilot can do a better job at it. One major thing is cost. I as an individual, if I am going to choose Copilot or Whisperer, where should I go? I'll tell you, GitHub Copilot charges you $10 a month or $100 a year subscription for individual, whereas your CodeWhisperer charges you $0, which is free for individuals. If you are a corporate, both GitHub Copilot and CodeWhisperer charges you $19 a month a user per business. I am writing code in Golang. Which assistant will support me? Oh, I don't have the languages this guys support on top of my head. I am certain that on my left and on my right you are seeing a comparison which talks about all the services that both the assistants support. To conclude, I put all of this point forward to your table. You get to decide which assistant you want to opt for. Having said that, be aware that these are all machine generated code. Before committing it to your repository, ensure that you are reading the code. For more such content, ensure that you follow us on LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram and Twitter, and subscribe to our YouTube channel. Thank you so much.